for 6.8, urban sustainability. So I'm gonna quickly skip this one. All right, so it says sustainable urban design. So recently, in recently meaning like in the last 30 or 40 years, we start to see that the cities are trying to reduce their impact on the environment. So that could be recycling, that could be upcycling, that could be cities having perhaps laws against perhaps glass, like bottled glasses. Cities maybe having more facilities to recycle a particular type of waste. So essentially, cities, they do many things to reduce their impact on the environment. There are some cities around the world that what they do is they, ban, perhaps certain types of cars or vehicles from coming into the downtown area. They want to encourage maybe more public transportation, whatever it is. But the main goal is to actually have a reduction of the impact on the environment. And the second focus is livability. So cities nowadays, they compete to have or attract more people to come live in those cities by having maybe some things that support a high quality of life and maybe even opportunities for jobs or stabilities. So the focus is usually on education, employment, better transportation, perhaps higher paying jobs. And I always like to say not all cities are equal. And essentially, when you compare, let's say, Tokyo to London, someone might say, well, London is much more livable than Tokyo. Someone else might say, well, Tokyo is much more livable than London, just because of different approaches. Both cities are, perhaps great cities, but maybe they offer different things that support a high quality of life. So what we have is, sustainable urban design policies. What we focus on is a smart growth. In many cities that have seen changes in recent years, there's a different approach to things. So instead of having you as the residential, area being far away from the central business district or the downtown area to get your things or to maybe perform your whatever business you have to get, they will just build things closer to the residential areas. So if you remember the edge cities, things are happening on the periphery. Well, think about this as a mixed-use zoning policy. So instead of having just a zone for residential areas, you have a zone that is both for residential, for commercial, for maybe medical, for educational. So it's a mixed-use zone. And I think the next picture right here kind of elaborates a little more on mixed-use development. So you can have condominiums or apartments, okay, for living, obviously. And then on the bottom floor right here, you can have retail or business space. That's a mixed-use development. Usually in many places that have a zone that is just for residential, you don't really have any kind of business in that building. So when you have mixed use, you're trying to optimizing, okay, the kind of like livelihood of the people in that area. So instead of you having to, maybe take a car and drive perhaps, for 30 minutes to get to the closest doctor's office, your doctor's office might be in the building that you're living in. Same thing with a supermarket or perhaps a gym. And so, essentially, they're encouraging people to walk, but at the same time, things, perhaps retail space is close to where you live. Okay. So, unlike the models that we've seen in previous or in other cities, the new development encourages the mixed use zoning policies. So, they try to have most of the policies, the zoning areas want to have more than one type of zoning. Okay. It says intended to increase residential density and reduce commute and travel times. So again, this aims to reduce the kind of stress on the infrastructure of a particular city by reducing perhaps the number of commuters from one neighborhood to the other. Okay. They also want to encourage maybe walkability or bikeability even. and encourage maybe perhaps the usage of public transportation more often. As you can see in this particular image, you have different types of lanes, one for the cars, one for the cars to perhaps drive on, one for the cars to park on. You have the sidewalk to people walk on, and you have people, biking in the bike lane. So those cities, they tend to be more pedestrian friendly, okay, rather than perhaps car friendly, and they could be both really. So you can see here, greatly decreases the urban sprawl and pollution. So you're encouraging more people to walk and perhaps take a bike, and therefore these cities, they encourage like closer, essentially places of interest. Okay. Another one here, you can see there's better access to transportation. So this particular metro system, it will have, different nodes of transportation. So this is a functional region, just so, we don't forget. It's a functional region that connects different neighborhoods or different zones to each other. Okay. And essentially what you see here is there's an encouragement of people taking public transportation. There's a wide, kind of, ranging assumption that most people who take the public transportation are low income people. And that does tend to be true in most cases. However, in some cities, such as Washington, D.C., for example, you see that there's a high percentage of residents taking the public transportation, and they're not necessarily low income people. Those could be, um, people who are working in the government, people who are working in particularly businesses. And so they just find it easier or maybe more economic to take the public transportation. And the system is pretty efficient. The public transportation system is pretty efficient. You can think about also like many European cities that encourage the residents to take public transportation. And so even countries, sometimes they intentionally add lots or like high taxes on gasoline to discourage people from owning cars, because owning a car would entail you're having to maybe spend a lot of money on petroleum, on gasoline, and therefore it becomes more economical for you to take the public transportation system. So just keep those policies in mind. Green belts are interesting policies. So if we take a look at the city of London, okay, on this map, essentially what you see around it is what we call a green belt. So it says here an area of green space, such as a park or maybe even agricultural land, perhaps a forest, right? That is intended to limit the urban spread, okay, the growth of the city. So cities like London are now forced to perhaps build up a little more, okay? And what happens is when you are limited to expanding the city limits, okay, that usually increases the price of real estate. And when the price of real estate is increased, okay, you have one of two things. You can, get a better paying job and, perhaps afford the, mortgage or the rent or, the house payment that you're living in, or you can just find somewhere else to live outside the city center. Okay. So the green belts are particularly designed to stop the spread of cities, because remember, before the city of London was built, it was mostly a kind of a forest area. Okay. And so at some point in history, or at really different points in history, particularly after the Industrial Revolution, when most British people lived or used to live in rural areas, and then they transitioned to city life, urban areas, because of the manufacturing um, kind of, start. What you see is they start to clear land for urban development. So again, you can see this in around most British cities like London. You can see that, of course, around the northwest as well. So Liverpool, Manchester. You can see that around many British cities, and that's because they want to stop the growth of those cities. Okay, that usually leads to some positive things and negative things. Okay, You can see that some of the positive things, you are reducing the sprawl, the spread. So we're not cutting down trees, we're not destroying the environment because we want to build houses and we want to build maybe skyscrapers. So the positive thing is that we are stopping the destruction of maybe the natural environment around us. Okay, we're also improving walkability because now we're all concentrated in just one area or one neighborhood, and so it encourages people to walk and encourages businesses to open up shop close to residential areas. And you can see here improves the diverse housing options. So you can find different types of housing units within the city. Improves the general livability. So, people are close to most things of interest to them. Okay. Of course, reduction in the negative environment of the cities in general. Some of the bad things, as I said, increased housing costs. So again, think about London, okay? Because of the green belt. So this is an actual government policy in the UK where they say you cannot build in the green belt area. So you are only limited to what's within the city limits, the white area, okay, on the map. And so that usually means land prices in London are going to be very high. Real estate prices are going to be high, which means that if you can't afford it, you're going to be pushed out of it, right? So as you can see, new developments are desirable. So real estate prices rise and are not affordable for the low income residents. So this is a definite negative. If you are wealthy, if you are part of the elites, you can afford it, you can enjoy the good quality of life. But if you are not, that means you are pushed out of the, kind of city. Of course, there's usually de facto segregation. That means there's like areas that are specifically for the wealthy people, and there are areas specifically for the low income people. Okay, and so a few years ago, I believe in London, the Grenfell apartment fire that happened and it killed many people. Well, that was a low income apartment building that was neglected. Okay, so it was neglected because it's low income people, and so they didn't really take care of the building. And when the fire broke out, they couldn't really control it, and unfortunately, it led to the death of many people. I think more than 80 people, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have other areas, in London, same exact city, where generally the wealthy people live in. So just keep that in mind, okay? And also potential loss of historical or place character. So you might have people who aren't necessarily from there living in the city of London, okay? So it could be like Russian billionaires, could be other Europeans, could be people from the Middle East, could be people from Latin America, anywhere really. Those people can perhaps afford to live in those areas, and that changes the character perhaps of the place. And so perhaps the original people or the people who historically have lived in a particular neighborhood, they have been perhaps pushed out. Okay, so definitely there are some positives and there are negatives about green belts. So just make sure that we kind of understand this idea. And that's really it about urban sustainability. The very last thing I do want to talk about is urban data. And urban data really just refers to how we, kind of look at things. Okay, and we can really look at things in two ways. We can look at things in terms of qualitative data, and we can look at things in terms of quantitative data. So the census usually, it asks people how many people live in your household, how much income do you make, how long have you lived in this area. So this is quantitative. It's related usually to numbers. Qualitative data says from field study or narratives. This is usually descriptive. Okay, this is usually kind of about people's perceptions. Okay, so as you can see, qualitative data involves describing something. Okay, so you could say, if we use the example of perhaps London, okay, well, someone who might provide you with qualitative data, they could say lots of tourists. Okay, they didn't give you a specific number, but lots of tourists. So they're describing the place, or could be like something like they could say it is fun, or it could be dangerous. That could be qualitative data based on perceptions. Okay, not necessarily opinions. Really, I know it says their opinions, but a perception usually has something that kind of backs it up based on fieldwork, based on some kind of observation. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We're not just saying, oh, it's your gut feeling, it's your opinion here. No, it's more like you've seen it, and that's how you came up to that perception, or you came up with that particular description. Okay. Just quickly here, I'm gonna skip this one actually. Quantitative data, you can see it's related to numbers. Okay, it says the best one is the census, because it tells us many things about a particular city. And so in this case, you can see in 2010, the population of New York City was almost 2 million people. And it kept rising all the way until about, I want to say 2016, when it reached almost 8.5 million. And then it dropped in 2019 to almost 3.8 million. So we can track the number of people who are perhaps coming in and or leaving New York City. And you might ask, well, how come, about 100,000 people have left New York City between 2016 and 2019? And the answer really is about affordability. Many people, just like the green belt about London, when it comes to New York City, the prices of real estate keep on rising, the rent keeps on rising, and therefore, at some point, people maybe stop being able to afford, the high rent prices, and so they say, you know what, I quit, I'm going to leave, and so they find another job somewhere else, and they just leave the area, and it just happens that the wealthy are able to stay in those cities, and the low-income people are usually going to be forced out of those cities. So with quantitative data, we can really analyze very specific information. So you can see here something like median household income, per capita income, which is different than the median, and then the person's living in poverty. So this particular city of Cincinnati, so 24% of people in Cincinnati in the US are living in poverty, so about a quarter. Okay, which is a very high number, honestly. But keep in mind that governments, they really report on this, and quantitative data can really give us a quick glimpse into what a city really looks like. So you're likely to really see a high percentage of poverty in Cincinnati, Ohio. Okay, so the point here says, what is the point? Qualitative data, they give policymakers kind of information to base their decisions on them. Okay, so if you're looking at this data about Cincinnati, Ohio, 24% of the people are living in poverty. Well, you might ask the question, well, why is it so high? Do we not have enough jobs for people in Cincinnati? Is there maybe discrimination against people in Cincinnati, Ohio? Is there discrimination against a particular group of people in Cincinnati, Ohio? What is going on? And so, if you're a decision maker, if you are working in the government, and you're looking at this kind of data and you analyze it, you might be able to, provide better decision making policies that might alleviate, hopefully, the problems that you see. Okay. That is really it.